Today, we're going to answer this question. What happens when needs go unmet? We're going to see the dark side of all the colors. Because every color, and I don't say this in a bad way, everyone has weaknesses. Everyone has natural, like some people naturally are more impatient. Some people naturally are more passive. Everyone has weaknesses, and it's not saying that everyone, when they are healthy, can function in these ways, but when we all struggle at times, when our needs go unmet, this is what's likely to happen. So the goal of this week is to see what happens to a yellow when they're not getting their need for attention met. How might they behave? What happens to a blue when they're not getting their space and silence? What happens to a red when there's chaos? What happens to a green when there is conflict? We'll try to see when needs go unmet. And you know that Snickers commercial? The Snickers, like, you're not yourself when you're hungry. You know that one? Okay? That's exactly the point right here, is that we're talking about needs, not wants. So think about what you are like. You have a need for food, and when you do not have your need for food met, you're not yourself. Mr. Snicker was right. Like, you aren't yourself. Is that you, like, even we invented a word. What's the word we invented when you're not just angry, but you're hungry, angry? Hangry. We invented a word to say what happens when my need isn't met, we act a certain way. That doesn't mean we're bad. It just means when needs go unmet, we act in ways that are less than optimal. True story. I actually know a wife who solved years of marital conflict. Years of marital conflict. She solved it by putting a snack in her husband's car. Because what she discovered is that every day he came home from work and he was always grumpy or he was always agitated, and they would always fight when he came home from work. And, you know, does he need counseling? Did I marry the wrong person? And like all this stuff. And then what she realized is he's hungry. He comes home from work hungry. She solved years of marital conflict with a box of Fig Newtons in the car. That's it. And all of a sudden he came back in a much better place. Well, I'm saying maybe the same is true in our relationships. Watch me here. Maybe your wife isn't a control freak. Maybe she's not a bad person. Maybe she's simply a red who has a need for a sense of control. And when she comes home and there's no control and things are chaos and she feels like you're not pulling your weight and she feels like you're not doing your duty, maybe that creates a pressure in her and a stress in her that causes her to yell and get impatient. But maybe the problem is it's a need that goes unmet. Maybe it isn't that your husband doesn't love you. Maybe he's a blue. And maybe he just needs a little bit of space when he comes home from work. It's not that he doesn't care. And it's not that he doesn't love you. And again, it's not that I married the wrong person and he's a monster. It's just simply, he's a blue. He needs his space and silence. And when you give it to him, you're going to see who he truly is on the inside. Maybe your friend isn't a people pleaser. Maybe they're just a yellow. Maybe they don't have a spiritual problem that requires casting out of a demon and fasting and prayer. Maybe they're just a yellow. They like to have fun and they like attention. They like you to approve. It doesn't mean anything bad. And finally, maybe your child isn't lazy. Maybe your child is just green. And maybe they respond to stress different than you do. And what motivates you and you wish would motivate them doesn't motivate them. It actually does the opposite. It leads to the exact opposite reaction. It's not that they're bad. It's not that they're lazy. They're just green. And we need to learn how to speak the language of those around us. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. We're going to talk about what happens when our needs aren't met, what happens when they're under pressure, what happens when there's stress, how everyone behaves in different ways. Some temperaments we'll see, when there's stress, yell. Some go silence. Some temperaments, passive-aggressive. Some temperaments, aggressive-aggressive. Some tend to escape stress. Some temperaments create the stress. We'll see all that this week. But before we get into that, one caveat, then I'll turn it over to Marianne. One caveat, okay, is that you're going to be tempted, as I'm discussing this today, you're going to be tempted to think, this is very good information, so I can learn how to solve him, and I can learn how to solve her. You're going to be tempted to think that. And truthfully, you will learn tips, like I said, the wife with the Fig Newtons. You will learn tips. But please, that's not the primary goal. The primary goal is not to see how to solve others. The primary goal is to see how to solve myself. That's why I want to show you this verse before we get into it. It's from Matthew chapter 7. Jesus said, "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? That's a question for you who are thinking, this is great so I can figure out how to deal with my whatever. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye but not the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, but look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite. Hypocrite. First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Our goal isn't to learn tricks or shortcuts or how to manipulate others. Our goal is ourself. Okay, to see what happens when my needs go unmet so I'm prepared and I can balance that out in the appropriate way.